He wakes before the sun, not by choice but by vibration, the tremor of glass from a glowing screen that demands his eyes before his breath has even deepened. The first act of his day is not gratitude, not awareness, but consumption. Notifications swarm the mind like insects, stinging him with little fragments of the world's urgency. He scrolls in half-sleep, feeding on headlines, comparison, and synthetic approval. The coffee brews not as ritual but as anesthesia. He burns quietly through caffeine as if it were courage, convincing himself that movement equals progress, that exhaustion equals purpose. His day is a blur of open tabs, urgent messages, and unkept promises to himself. He mistakes speed for direction, noise for aliveness. By evening, his body twitches with a fatigue that sleep cannot heal because it is not physical. It is the ache of a man who has traded stillness for stimulation. He has mastered the art of doing everything and the tragedy of becoming nothing. This is a fracture, the split between motion and meaning, between effort and essence. And within this fracture lives an invisible hunger, to feel like a man of purpose rather than a slave of momentum. They told you the cure was to work harder, dream bigger, push more. They taught you to chase energy spikes and call them motivation, to worship productivity while forgetting presence. But deep down, you can feel the absurdity of it, the way your life feels efficient but shallow, full but directionless. There's a quiet knowing that beneath the dopamine loops, something ancient is dying, the calm certainty once carried by disciplined men who needed no applause to validate their strength. The truth is, modern chaos is not born of weakness but of excess. We have built lives of such abundance that simplicity feels foreign. We mistake abundance for advantage, forgetting that the samurai, the monk, the craftsman all found peace not by adding, but by subtracting. Picture his day instead. No alarms, no glowing screens. The first sound he hears is a breath sliding through his body. He moves with deliberate ease. Each small act has weight. He sharpens his blade as others check their messages. He eats with precision, walks in silence, treats hours like sacred ground. His life is a sequence of quiet certainties, not desperate improvisations. In him there is no split between thought and action, because discipline has sutured the two into one. That, too, was a man, but one sculpted by stillness rather than stimulation. You stand between these two worlds, the modern rush that fragments you and the ancient rhythm that could rebuild you. Your exhaustion is not proof of failure. It is evidence of yearning. You are not lazy. You are lost in abundance, craving direction. The body knows this. The mind whispers it during sleepless nights when you stare at the ceiling, wondering how a man surrounded by opportunity can feel so powerless. The answer is not more habits, not another system or app. The real power lies in subtraction, in the stripping away of what is unnecessary until only what is essential remains. So here's the question that begins everything. What if becoming your most powerful self isn't about adding more, but about removing what dulls you? What if greatness begins not with ambition but with space? What if a single, imperceptible daily act, a pause before reaching for your phone, a breath held before you speak in anger, could reorder your identity more completely than 1,000 grand resolutions? The smallest act becomes the sharpest edge when done with awareness. A single moment of stillness can cut through years of distraction. This is not poetic exaggeration. It is discipline rediscovered, the ancient kind that forged men who were unbreakable not because they were perfect, but because they were present. So breathe. Feel the weight of that possibility. The chaos around you is only loud because the silence within has been neglected. Step out of the noise. Let the light of that phone dim. Let the eyes lift from the glow. Imagine a doorway opening between worlds, the hum of modern life fading into the echoing stillness of an empty dojo. Wooden floors, cold air, the faint scrape of sandals in the dark. You have been running forward your entire life. Now, the path begins by standing still. To understand how to rebuild yourself, you must first learn to see the world through an older pair of eyes, eyes that look not for progress but for presence. The modern man worships results, progress bars, and measurable outputs. Yet the ancients, the samurai and the Zen monks who quietly shaped entire civilizations, did not speak of progress. They spoke of the moment. Their lens of power was built through Shoshin, the beginner's mind, a way of moving through life not with arrogance but with wonder. To them, mastery was not a summit reached but a circle walked endlessly, each revolution revealing a deeper layer of precision and humility. In the West, We glorify optimization, more hacks, shorter routes, smarter tools. But the East learned early that the tool means nothing when the hand is unsteady. The practice means everything. Consider the code of Bushidō, the invisible spine of the samurai spirit. It was not a list of rules. It was a living rhythm, a way of carrying oneself whether preparing for war or pouring tea. Courage, rectitude, honor, respect, not lofty ideals, but daily postures of the soul. Discipline for them was not a system to manage life. It was life itself. Even in stillness, they were alert. Even in war, they were calm. Their discipline was devotion disguised as ordinary behavior. That's a secret the digital age forgot. Strength is not born of frenzy but of form. The samurai understood Guji practice without gap, to repeat one movement so consistently that it erases the boundary between doing and being. No motivation required, no self-judgment, just embodiment. Imagine a swordsman alone in the courtyard, morning mist rising from the stones. He swings his blade for the 1,000th time, each motion identical, each strike dissolving the ego that performs it. He is not striving to improve. He is learning to vanish, letting the act perfect itself through him. There is no thought of productivity here. There is only rhythm, breath, and steel. To an onlooker, it might seem monotonous. To him, it is sacred. This is a paradox of Zen discipline. It is repetition that liberates. While the modern worker chases novelty, the disciplined man finds freedom in constancy. He does not finish tasks. He perfects moments. That is the difference between moving fast and moving true. The world trains you to value volume. More messages answered, more representatives completed, more goals achieved. But the ancients trained to refine quality, to strike once with total presence, to speak once with complete truth. They lived with attention so sharp it cut through illusion. Their days were not filled with more, but with better. The code of Bushidō wasn't written to control men, but to remind them that every action is a declaration of who they are. When life was lived as art, discipline was worship. Think of Shoshin, the beginner's mind, as the opposite of burnout. The man who believes he knows everything is burdened. The one who returns to curiosity is light. The modern man, crammed with techniques, loses touch with sincerity. The ancient warrior, humbly repeating the basics, keeps his edge. You may not wield a sword, but your mind, your words, your choices, they are all blades in your own way. Every moment you bring full presence to an ordinary act, you reclaim mastery. You stop performing discipline and start embodying it. So pause for a breath. In this pause live the entire teaching of Zen. Stillness is strength. The question is no longer, how do I do more? It is, can I be completely here? Because that single act, done with attention, outlasts 1,000 rush movements. So how does this ancient calm translate to your rush hour reality? There are moments that divide a life not with thunder, but with a quiet click of decision. They never look heroic at the time, just small, almost forgettable gestures. But these are the tiny movements where identity turns its face toward power or back into drifting. A man seldom changes through one great declaration. He changes through the subtle loyalty of what he repeats. The modern world romanticizes reinvention as fireworks, a grand goal, a massive overhaul, a 12-week challenge. But the nervous system is not inspired by explosions. It's shaped by rhythm. The brain trusts what it sees you do often, not what it hears you swear you'll do later. Every small act of consistency sends a signal deeper than ambition ever could. I am this kind of man. Imagine a man whose life has drifted into clutter. He wakes surrounded by clothes on the floor, half-finished tasks, notifications cascading through his mind before he even brushes his teeth. One morning, after another night of burnout masked by scrolling, he decides, almost out of frustration, almost by accident, to make his bed. Not perfectly, not militarily, just neatly, with a quiet sense that for this single square of his world, order will be restored. He pulls the sheet taut, straightens a pillow, and stands still. That stillness feels different. It is absurdly small, yet within that smallness is relief, a moment where chaos obeys. The next morning he does it again, this time slower, with gratitude. Over days, the act ceases to be a chore and becomes a signal. The brain begins to interpret. I am someone who finishes what he starts. From that simple beginning, Other corners of his life adjust, the desk gets cleared, his morning structured, his breathing becomes measured. He starts to see discipline not as something to chase, but as something to protect. The shift is almost invisible but irreversible. Each day, his body recognizes a pattern. Deliberate action equals calm. That is the quiet alchemy of micro-decisions. The samurai understood this without scientific vocabulary. They practiced Kaizen hundreds of years before the world gave it a name, the art of 1% improvement. To them, the smallest refinement was an act of devotion, a gesture of alignment with the universe. Perfection was not a destination. It was a method of staying awake. In the same way, each conscious choice you make, choosing to finish washing the cup instead of leaving it in the sink, to pause your breath before responding in irritation, to close your laptop at the same hour with reverence rather than fatigue, works not on the behavior alone but on the identity behind it. These are not minor victories. They are new neural signatures etched into your sense of self. Every repetition stains a fabric of identity like ink on cloth. Faint at first, but spreading until the entire pattern changes. Over time, the man who once felt inconsistent begins to feel reliable, not because life became easier, but because he became clear. The smallest dependable act outlives 1,000 inspired intentions. This is a discipline of atoms, the building of a man cell by cell, choice by choice. When you start to understand that your nervous system is listening more closely than your conscious mind, you realize that each consistent micro-decision is a whisper training it to trust you again. The mind that trusts itself no longer needs motivation. Habit becomes ceremony. Present this way, discipline is not labor, it is alignment. It is how chaos reorders itself into rhythm. So, if the question of transformation has haunted you, if you've waited for the great push, the decisive event, the life-changing revelation, stop waiting. Begin with the simplest thing you can control, but execute it with artistry. Let that small, precise motion carve the first groove of order into the noise of your day. The path to mastery will not open through ambition alone, but through devotion of detail. Because wisdom is sterile without practice, and the samurai knew this. The world tells you that success belongs to those who never stop moving, that constant hustle is proof of worthiness, that motion itself is virtue. But underneath that mythology lies exhaustion masquerading as progress. We have confused busyness with brilliance. We stack tasks like armor, shielding ourselves from stillness because stillness exposes truth. Yet in Zen and in the discipline of the samurai, stillness is not an absence of energy. It is concentrated force, order gathering itself before release. Stillness is a warrior drawing breath before the strike, the calm before deliberate violence, the pause that sharpens decision into destiny. It is where chaos collapses into clarity. Zazen, the art of sitting in silence, is not retreat, it is recalibration. 4 centuries monks perfected productivity without schedules or software. They sat a day, they watched, they breathed, nothing more. And from that apparent nothing emerged a kind of focus that can split confusion like a blade. In that stillness, the nervous system resets, attention stops scattering and begins to converge. Modern neuroscience confirms what ancient practice knew intuitively. When the mind ceases constant motion, dopamine rhythms balance, cortisol declines, and the prefrontal cortex regains control over impulse. Stillness reintroduces sovereignty. You are no longer dragged by stimulation. You are choosing where to place attention. That choice, unhurried, lucid, unwavering, is a true definition of power. Picture the samurai sharpening his sword in silence. Each stroke steady, deliberate, equal in pressure. The blade is shaped not by aggression, but by patience. He sharpens not to hack through enemies, but to refine the blade until it can cut through still air. Now imagine the modern professional sharpening his mind instead of steel. Before opening emails, before touching his phone, he sits for 5 minutes, observing the chaos of his thoughts without trying to fix them. He notices the inhale, the exhale, the slight tension behind the eyes. Slowly, his nervous system cools. The fragments start to settle. By the time he begins his day, decisions emerge clean, purposeful. Efficiency without rush, depth without fatigue. In stillness, he has carved out strategic advantage. The world says, grind harder. Zen says, remove friction. Productivity worships addition, but mastery begins with subtraction. The samurai did not ask how much he could do in a day. He asked how precisely he could do one thing. Stillness teaches that perfection is not in quantity but in quality, the intensity of attention. Breath by breath, Zazen empties a mind of noise until only the essential remains. And from that emptiness comes speed born of precision, not panic. There is no wasted motion. The hand moves exactly when the mind commands. The strike lands without hesitation. This is the meaning of efficiency, the union of thought and action through silence. Practice stillness like one sharpens steel, consistently, without impatience. Sit down. Close the eyes not to escape, but to fortify. Breathe through the turbulence of impatience until it dissolves into clarity. Even 5 minutes daily, performed with full awareness, is enough to retune a day's rhythm. The senses heighten. You start hearing conversations beneath noise, noticing moments between seconds. Your movements simplify because your perceptions refine. You begin cutting away what doesn't matter, unnecessary words, rushed choices, reactive emotions. The longer you practice, the more you realize how little is required to live effectively. Stillness becomes the edge that divides a reactive man from a composed one. It's no surprise that warriors began each day not in frenzy but in meditation. They understood that UN-mastered motion kills precision. The modern man, chasing 1,000 goals, bleeds his energy across too many directions. In his head, 10 battles rage. In the samurai's heart, there's only one. That is the gift of stillness, unification. Stillness doesn't demand withdrawal from the world. It demands mastery within it. It is presence wielded as a weapon. When you bring a silent, grounded mind into chaotic spaces, you dominate not by aggression but by calm authority. Nothing rattles you because you've already faced stillness, and stillness is a mirror of truth. From that discipline arises peak performance, not as intensity but as inevitability. The best work, the best art, the best life decisions flow from a state of unbroken attention, and that attention can only be trained in silence. Try this. Before you act, pause for a single breath. Feel the body, feel the weight of the air, and continue with full consciousness. That single pause differentiates impulse from intention. Multiply that pause across the hours, the months, the years. You create a man whose every movement carries precision. This is how stillness becomes strength, not passive, not decorative, but potent. Presence creates power, but presence alone must take form. Now, we forge that form through code. Modern masculinity is often a performance, loud, uncertain, addicted to proving itself. Men flex status instead of focus, chase validation instead of virtue. Yet power built on performance always trembles, because it requires an audience. The samurai lived by a different compass, one that pointed not outward toward approval, but inward toward alignment. Their strength did not come from dominance, but from coherence, from the fusion of sword and soul. They called this compass Bushidō, the way of the warrior. It was never a myth or a museum relic. It was a system of energy management. The 7 virtues of Bushidō were not poetic ideals carved into scrolls. They were daily protocols designed to keep a man undivided. Rectitude, courage, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, loyalty, each one a living principle, each one a discipline of power. Interpreted through modern life, these 7 are not rules to obey but forces to balance inside the man who seeks wholeness. Rectitude is clarity. It is a refusal to live in contradiction. It says, do the right thing, even when no one watches, not for morality's sake but to stop leaking energy through deceit. Courage is movement through fear, not the absence of it. Every time you keep a promise despite doubt, courage accumulates, like heat beneath the blade. Benevolence is power restrained. It is strength expressed with compassion so that mastery doesn't rot into tyranny. Respect is the art of proportion, knowing the weight of each word, the boundary of each gesture. It keeps power clean. Honesty is transparency with oneself, the stripping away of masks and excuses. Honor is remembering who you are when temptation invites you to forget. And loyalty, the rarest of all, is commitment to a chosen path long after the excitement fades. Practice them not as moral decorations, but as systems recalibrating your attention and emotion. Each virtue threads chaos into coherence. Try neglecting one, and the system begins to wobble. A man without honesty cannot hold courage for long. A man without respect suffocates benevolence. The code works only as a whole, because it describes a complete human being. When the samurai rose each morning, he did not split his identity into roles. He was warrior and artist, student and teacher, servant and leader all at once. He needed no alter ego for battle or business. His bow was the same in war as in conversation. Contrast that with a modern man who flickers between masks, professional, friend, lover, digital persona. Every change fractures him slightly until the pieces stop recognizing each other. The more identities he juggles, the weaker his presence becomes. Energy drains through inconsistency. Power decays with dissonance. Integration, then, is a highest form of masculinity, the quiet authority that arises when who you are privately mirrors who you are publicly. It's a state where your words, habits, and intentions march in the same direction. The man who reaches that point doesn't shout strength, he emanates it. People trust him not because he demands respect, but because he radiates it naturally. The samurai trained his silence into their posture. We can do the same. Revisit the virtues as daily calibration points. Rectitude at the moment of decision. Am I acting from alignment or appetite? Courage at the edge of resistance. Am I choosing growth over comfort? Benevolence when in power. Am I protecting or exploiting? Respect when confronted. Can I stay composed without shrinking? Honesty before bed. What truth am I avoiding? Honor in solitude. Would I still act the same if unseen? Loyalty each morning. Will I recommit to my principles even if no reward comes? Sit with these questions. Which virtue have you most neglected? Which one feels foreign yet necessary? Honest reflection on those two will reveal the crack where your energy leaks. Begin there, rebuild from there. Understand this, it isn't aggression that defines masculinity. It's containment. A river without banks floods and destroys. A river with form nurtures life. Discipline is a bank that gives your power purpose. Aggression is easy. Composure costs clarity. The man who can hold tension without reacting commands more respect than the one who erupts to prove himself. That still, disciplined presence, the kind that enters a room and shifts the air without a word, is a true sign of integrated masculinity. It's not the fire that burns hot for a moment, but the ember that glows steady through the dark. So unlearn the caricature of strength taught by noise and advertising. Flex jawlines, constant dominance, public victories. Strength is found in the man who can bear silence, in the man who can keep promises nobody celebrates, in the man who polishes virtue in private until it gleams through action. The samurai did not train for approval. They trained for readiness. Living by Bushidō today means behaving as though every task, responding to an email, standing in a line, speaking to a stranger is a mirror of your internal code. Once you start moving through the world with that alignment, distraction loses appeal, comparison loses power, emptiness dissolves into direction. Discipline ceases to be pressure, it becomes identity. When the code lives in you, you stop chasing motivation, you become the living proof of it. Masculine presence isn't intensity, it's integrity under pressure. Once you carry the code, you must craft your days around it. Burnout is not the exhaustion of energy, it is the erosion of rhythm. It happens when days blur into each other without ceremony, when every moment becomes transactional, when the body no longer recognizes beginnings or endings. Modern life runs like a machine, yet men are not machines. They are instruments meant to be tuned. The samurai understood this. They knew that power requires cadence, that every strike must be followed by silence, just as every inhale requires exhale. Their lives moved in cycles, battle and rest, focus and release, form and formlessness. After conflict, they would return to simplicity, tending gardens, repairing armor, polishing tools. There was no confusion between when to act and when to be at peace. Today, we have forgotten that art. We burn not because we lack strength, but because we attempt to live continuously in the yang of execution, denying the necessary yin of reflection. The nervous system, stretched between constant alerts and endless production, mistimes its own pulse. And so, we suffocate under the paradox of abundance, surrounded by opportunity yet starved for meaning. The cure is ritual, the structure that reintroduces rhythm. Ritual is a bridge between speed and serenity, where discipline becomes breath again. Begin the day with silence, not stimulus. Before checking messages, sit in stillness, even for a minute, grounding your attention in the body. This is a yin discipline, the gathering of awareness before the strike. Then move, strengthen the body through controlled motion. Running, lifting, even walking with deliberate posture. Physicality grounds masculinity in presence. not distraction. This is a yang discipline execution aligned with clarity. As the day unfolds, respect transitions. Mark them consciously. Before meeting, stretch your fingers. Take a breath. Before eating, acknowledge hunger with gratitude. Before sleeping, disengage from screens as you would sheath a blade, cleanly, respectfully. These are rituals, not routines. The difference is intention. Routine numbs, ritual awakens. Through such simple ceremonies, you begin teaching the body again what time feels like, when to strike, when to rest, when to release. You stop living in an unbroken line and start living in a pulse. The mind craves this pattern because it mirrors nature itself. Ocean tides, lunar phases, breaths in the lung, heartbeats. When life has no rhythm, urgency becomes a substitute. But when you respect rhythm, life stops demanding urgency. This single shift ends a spiral of burnout. When you honor cycles, effort feels natural again. There is no guilt in resting, no panic in pausing, because both are part of the same continuum of strength. The samurai didn't meditate to escape war. They meditated to move through it with grace. Likewise, rest is not retreat. It is renewal that makes execution precise. Ritual is freedom disguised as form. Men often resist schedules, believing structure traps them. But in reality, rhythm liberates because it turns chaos into choreography. Once the rhythm of your day stabilizes, ambition stops tasting like stress. You move through work like a warrior through kata, each motion crisp, measured, complete. You end your evenings not depleted but emptied. The weibo relaxes after release. This is the ancient cadence of mastery, concealed beneath a modern life that forgotten to. Breathe. To live this way is not to slow down but to synchronize, not to abandon power, but to channel it through intervals of rest. The man who learns rhythm never burns out. He burns steady. Once rhythm returns, identity flows naturally and the shift becomes visible. There comes a point when repetition stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like essence. This is integration, the moment the external practice fuses with the internal identity, when discipline no longer feels like something you're doing but simply who you are. The samurai described mastery as a merging of mind, body, and intent until the act performed itself through you. It is the same process as forging a blade. First heat, then water, then polish. The heat is struggle, those early mornings when your resistance screams, when you still crave comfort, when you doubt that such small act could mean anything. The water is reflection, those pauses where you notice subtle changes, where you begin to sense rhythm emerging beneath the noise. The polish is consistency, the countless, quiet repetitions that refine your edge until discipline gleams effortlessly. Over time, these cycles sculpt the nervous system like a craftsman shaping iron. Neural pathways deepen, patterns of focus harden into instinct. The man who once needed motivation now runs on momentum. He no longer asks whether he can. He simply does. This is the identity fusion process, belief welded to behavior until separation disappears. The old chaos of uncertainty dissolves. The same room, the same job, the same city, yet everything feels cleaner, more precise. You are no longer fragmented. Your thoughts, emotions, and actions move as a single current, silent but decisive. People begin to sense it before you speak. They can feel the steadiness, the grounded pulse beneath your words. True power is always invisible first. It lives in the stillness between gestures. You stop needing to advertise your strength because its presence commands attention. Validation becomes irrelevant. Direction replaces it. Confidence, real confidence, is not energy pushing outward, it's gravity pulling things in. The integrated man doesn't compete for focus. It finds him naturally. And in this new control, something remarkable emerges. Peace. Not the hollow calm of avoidance, but the solid tranquility of alignment. Each habit you once forced into existence is now spontaneous precision. You move through life like a swordsman through form, not thinking about performance, simply doing what must be done. This is how art is born from discipline. Look back at the man from the beginning, the one waking in chaos, flooded with screens and caffeine, sprinting without center. Picture him now walking through the same morning with deliberate quiet. The phone still vibrates, but his breath stays even. The coffee still steams, but he tastes it instead of consuming it. The day still demands, but he decides the order. Nothing externally has changed, yet everything internally has aligned. His life hums instead of hurries. The practice that once felt heavy has dissolved into lightness. There is composure even in movement, certainty even in challenge. He is no longer chasing meaning through effort. He embodies meaning through rhythm. That is a hidden summit of masculine discipline, not domination, but serenity anchored in action. Integration makes a man dangerous in the most sacred way, dangerous to disorder, to distraction, to doubt. Because once you have mastered your own rhythm, no external chaos can unmake it. You can stand in storms without losing center. You can face loss without breaking form. This is power without aggression, confidence without display, leadership without demand. It is a quiet force, the kind that influences by presence rather than persuasion. Every discipline up to now has been training for this stillness and motion, this balance between edge and ease. Every transformation demands a vow, the moment where practice becomes identity. Every transformation requires a witness, and the one who must witness yours is you. The journey from chaos to coherence, from noise to presence, is incomplete until you seal it with your own words. This is your internal oath, not a motivational slogan, not a temporary vow, but a quiet consecration of identity. Men once carved such oaths into wood or whispered them before dawn. You will write yours with intention, a few lines that bind you to the man you are choosing to become. Write it somewhere visible, yet sacred. Begin with one sentence that defines your direction. I honor my discipline as a source of freedom. Then state the single act that will embody your code, a small daily gesture that reminds your nervous system who you are. It could be one mindful breath before every decision, one moment of stillness before you speak, one task completed without rush. The act itself is less important than the consciousness behind it. When repeated with awareness, it becomes a signal to your deeper self. I keep my word. This is not about motivation, which depends on mood. It's about consecration, which endures regardless of feeling. The man who keeps his oaths no longer needs inspiration, because his practice defines him. Through repetition, the oath transforms from promise into presence until every movement of your day echoes it. Let the oath be your personal Bushidō, your private code that no one else needs to understand. The world may never see you recite it, but your actions will speak it fluently. Remember, the tiny shift was never tiny. It was the spark that rewrote your identity. It was the moment you stopped performing discipline and began living as discipline. The ancient masters believed that the smallest ritual performed with sincerity could alter a lifetime. You've proven them right each time you chose presence over impulse, stillness over noise. Now your task is to protect that fire. Let your days unfold as evidence of your commitment, a silent rhythm known only to you. When fatigue returns, visit the oath. When doubt whispers, repeat it aloud. Over time, its words will become less a mantra and more mirror, reflecting back the man you have forged in silence. This oath is your companion and your compass, a North Star reminding you that discipline is not restriction but remembrance, the consistent act of returning to who you truly are. Breathe once. Feel the pulse steadying. You are no longer fractured. You are the forge in the flame. Be like water, still yet unstoppable. Be like the sword, silent until purpose calls. Begin today with one deliberate act, and watch the world bend quietly around your new identity.